Welcome back, CSC230 W1 to ex7 Jumbotron layout, and we're going to start working with the CSS. We haven't done that yet. We have all our HTML content. And what I've done right now is I've logged into my Replit account and I'm in my CSC230 W1 Repel. Now remember, our Repel basically has an index page and it has a bunch of folders with other exercises in them. And when we run it and we preview it, it will always show the main root index page. And what we did is put links to our other folders and subsequently our index pages inside those folders when we go there. So just want to point that out. Also, what I'm going to do is go to my Warren and open up under Documents and Resources, and it's actually bookmarks. So I'm going to scroll down the page and look for Unit 8 Jumbotron Sample Layout so I can look at that. And I'm just going to move that to the right. I'll keep it to the far right when I do that. And then also in here, what I'll do is when I use the little preview here, open in a new tab, it's going to open up this page. It'll never open up any other pages. It works like that with Python as well. And I'll open that up, and then I'll just click on ex7, and that way I'm looking at my page, and I'll just keep refreshing this page. So I have my sample page to look at, and I have the page that I'm working on with all my HTML content. And what I'm going to do in here is basically go to ex7 and go to my index page and just kind of familiarize myself with some of the names because we're going to be making CSS based on that. I'm going to move this over. I don't really need this at all, so I'm going to collapse that. But if you remember, we have our nav, our banner, our main, and our footer. Those are our main classes that we're working with, and their elements. There is a nav element, a header element, a section element, and a footer, but we're going to be using the classes as much as we can. And we have H1s and Ps inside there, and the only other more complicated areas is the main, which actually has 3 divs, which are call1, call2, call3, and they'll have a general call class as well that has all the shared characteristics. So those are some of the things we're going to be working on. Also, the nav menu up here, we have an unordered list, and we could even give it a class nav menu. Matter of fact, that's the first thing I'll do. I'll just put ul, and I'll put class equals, and I'll just call it nav menu. That way that's named if we need to. So I'll put that in quotes, and I think we have that okay. It doesn't look like we typically have spaces in the equal signs there, but that way that's our nav menu, which is basically an unordered list. So we can use that as well. Now, as long as I'm in here, I'm going to link to my CSS, which I don't have yet, but we're going to do that in our head element. And I'll do it before the title. And I'll just go link and hit my tab key. And it's asking for a style sheet. And inside the href, I'm going to put styles.css. Now, we don't have one yet, but that's what I'm going to call it, styles.css. You could call that anything you want, but that's typically what I call it. You could call it style.css. Just make sure when you create it, it's the same name. So inside ex7 here, I'll just click on my ex7 folder, and I'll add another file, and I'll call it styles.css, and I'll hit enter, and there it is. And there's nothing here so far. And I think what I'll do is do like a global reset. We've been using the asterisk, and inside there I'll just do the margin padding and wipe everything out. And I could even do something for body. I think what I did was change the font family on it. So I'm going to put body, and I'll do font family. And if you go back here, it'll start bringing up some font families. And none of these are perfect that I'd like to use here, but I do want to mix some of these. And remember, font families work in order of what someone would have on their computer. Now, eventually we could use Google Fonts, so we don't always have to stick what's here. But just to start, I want to put everything in kind of a sans serif, and then I'll just kind of cherry pick some serif fonts for headings, like a Georgia or something like that. So I'm going to use Arial Helvetica, but then I'll also put Tahoma and maybe Verdania in here. And actually, I'm not even going to put Helvetica. I'm just going to put Arial, but then first, I'm going to put Tahoma, and then I'm going to put Verdania, and I'll put a comma. Now, you only need quotes around them if they're 2 words, but these are all 1 word. and it's white right now because I didn't put my semicolon, and that's okay. So I'm going to use that font family, and then I'm also going to change the font size to 110%. And I think that's it so far. I think that's all I'm going to do so far. I could run it and just to see if, well, I don't have to run it, but I'll go up here and I'll refresh it. And everything changed, and you can see my margins and paddings were wiped out, and everything changed. So everything's in a sans serif font. That's what I want. I like that font. Looks nice, although we may put our heading fonts in something else, but that's good to start. Now, we could even put a general kind of, you know, after every P, put like a margin bottom or something, like a space after. I'll put something like that in there. I think I did that before. Now, some of these things will change as we go, but I'll put margin bottom, and I'll just put 1M for now. And at least it'll just kind of break things up a little. It'll just kind of separate things. And I get in the habit of hitting run, so I just keep doing that. So every paragraph has that underneath. So that's okay. And we're going to have padding between all these kind of sections that are here too. But at least it's broken up a little bit right now. Okay, so those are some basic things to start. Now, what I'm going to do next is create a container style. Now, I didn't use container here anywhere. There's no container here, but what I'm going to do is make a container class, which is basically just a style, and I'm going to apply it to all the elements. And what's going to be shared between all of them, if you remember this, is going to be an 80% width, so it'll be 80%, and we'll do margin auto so that it centers it. Margin auto just kind of pushes it to the center by putting auto margin on either side. So we're going to do that, and that'll be for all four, and they'll all have that container class. So that way they'll all kind of line up the same. So I'll do that. And I'll go back to my styles and make a container class. Now I should put a dot here. That's why I'm seeing a green squiggly line, because there's no element called container. I have to put a dot there to indicate it's a class name. And actually it's also showing the squiggly line because there's nothing in here yet. So I'll tab over, and again I'm going to put width 80%, so it'll be 80% of the window, and I'll do margin auto, and let me just check it out. Why didn't anything happen? Well, we didn't apply container to anything. Nobody has the class container. It's just a class floating here. Nothing's happening to our page. So what we have to do is go here and apply it to all of these. So I decided to put the more specific name like nav banner first, and then I'm going to put container. Now if we decide something different, I did some research. I didn't find any specific way that they said to put these. So I guess if you just stick to your own scheme. So I'm going to put container here, and then for this one I'm going to put banner and then container, which they're all going to share, and then main is going to share container, and then down at the bottom, footer is going to share container. And remember, they could all be in the quotes, and there's no comma. They're just inside the quotes with a space separating them. I'll run, I'll go up here, I'll refresh it, and that's kind of what I want. So it's kind of centering on the page, and it's 80% of the page. So that's what I want so far. That's working okay. And one thing that I did do in the past, because I was thinking something's different here, I did do overflow auto in the past, but since we're not going to use a float inside containers for the most part, I think I'll let that go for now, unless we need it, because we're going to try to use flex for the 3 columns. So we might not need that, we might, but that's a good start for what we have so far. Now what I'm going to do next is kind of tackle from the top down a little bit, because now we have kind of the main CSS kind of holding things together a little bit. That's kind of holding it together with just the basic things that we have there. But now we're going to start to break it down a little bit more and go into things like nav. We have something that's very general. These are all very general things now. Now we'll try to get a little more specific. So I think what I'll go into next is nav. So I'm going to go down here and target nav. Now I don't have to target the element nav. I'm targeting the class name. And I'm not even going to worry about a background color yet. If you think about it, there's a background color of this kind of dark gray, but I don't have to do that yet. But what I do want to put is maybe padding above and below. And when I think about each container, maybe each container should have padding above and below. Actually, that's something to think about. What is shared between all of these? Well, they might have the same padding above and below. So instead of putting that into nav, I think I might go into here and put padding above and below. Now, if you remember how padding works, if you put something in just one number, it'll go around on all sides. So if I just put 1M, there would be padding around all sides. But if you put two numbers, it'll be top and bottom first, and then left and right last. So if I do something like 1M, and I put a space, and I put 0, that's going to mean that there's top and bottom is 1M, left and right is 0. Now, if I put all 4 here, I could do this. Remember the trouble thing, TR? I could put top 1M, right 0, bottom 1M, and then left 0. That would be trouble. If you forget which one works, you could always do that. And what I had 1M0 is just a shortcut for doing that because it's basically repeating. It's like when you have hex numbers and they do FF, 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 and you could just put 3 Fs. So that'll put padding on the top and the bottom and nothing on the side. So that'll also help with some of this here, and it'll spread things out just a little bit. It'll spread out each individual area because they all have a container class. But they're all sharing that, so I'm going to do that in there instead of building it into my nav. Now you can see this is broken up a little bit. Some space in between them, the 4, but these do not, but they're going to be in columns anyway. So I'll go up and work on my nav a little bit, and maybe I'll put a background color. I'm going to tab over. I'll put background color, and I'm kind of going out of order of what I've done in the past, but just kind of working as I'd work through it. So I'll keep doing that, and I'm going to do kind of a gray color, and let's see if there's a dark gray. Dark gray. And even though that might not be exactly the color I want, I can probably adjust it after I do that. So let's see what this looks like. Now you can see what's happening here. The gray color is not extending all the way across the page. Do you know why? Well, the reason is because nav has both the classes of container and nav applied. Now I switched these around just to see if it made a difference. It did not. So I'll put them back the way they were. But because I decided, and I only did this because I thought it would work better, I didn't even try it out. Like I said, this layout actually has a container inside every element. So inside the nav, there's a container div. Inside here, there's a container div. Inside here, there's a container div. And inside here, there's a container div. And I thought, wow, why do I need all those container divs when I can just give it a class of div? Well, I just found out here, if nav has a class of container and of nav, and I give it a background color, it's only going to go so far because its width is now 80%. So I kind of shorten that. So that's going to be an issue I'm going to have to address. And let me just try something here, and we'll see if we have to do this for everything. What I originally planned to do was not give this a class of container, but actually, after here, I was going to go div.container, and I'll hit tab, and I was just going to put a container inside the nav that would hold everything. And I'll cut this, and I'll put it after the last thing here. And if I do that, I'm going to tab everything in because they're all going to be children. What you could do is you could highlight all this, and sometimes this can create problems, but you can highlight all this and hit tab, and it'll bump everything over. So instead of tabbing everything like that, if you need to take a whole block and move it over, just do that. Now what I did, I put a class of container, and I was trying to avoid putting an extra div in here. Now if I do this and I refresh it, now it's going to work. So I'm going to have to do that. I was trying to avoid that. I thought it would be easier to do that. And in theory, it seemed like it would work until you actually do it. So in theory is one thing. Actually putting it is another thing. So as far as background things, what we're going to have to do is put an actual, we can't just have a class of container. We're actually going to make a container that's going to go inside all of those. That's not hard to do. And instead of giving that a class of container, we'll just have a container that is its own class, or it's actually a div. So I'm just going to put an extra line here. This isn't that hard to do. We just have to do it 4 times. I'll just put div.container, hit tab, and then make sure I take the closing div, cut it, and here I'll put it after the button. So everything's inside a header, and then I'm going to highlight all the stuff that's inside the container and hit my tab key. Now, I didn't put any background color on that, so that's not going to change. The only time you're going to see it is with the background color right now. But I can do it here too. So right after the main class here, I'm going to put div.container. And it's okay that these things happen. Like I said, I don't have it all planned out. I'm kind of working through it as I go. So hopefully you'll get what I'm trying to do as well. And hopefully what I was trying to do made sense. It did make sense. Now I'll get rid of this because this has its class here. And again, I'm cutting this and putting it at the end of all the columns. So there is another div here of column 3. I have to make sure I put a closing div here and make sure I highlight everything up here and indent it. That's another reason why indenting it, because if we have divs inside of divs, it's hard to see if they're paired up correctly. So I'm going to highlight everything, all the columns, and just hit tab. And now you could see my opening div, and then my closing div is down there. And then the last thing I'll do here, same thing. I'll just put in a div.container. I'll hit tab. Cut my closing div tag, Command X or Control X if you're on Windows, put it after the paragraph here, and then all I have to indent here is just this. I could just tab it over. I don't have to highlight anything. So now everything's okay. And if I just want to try putting a background color on footer, even though I didn't want to mess with background colors yet, but just for example, if I put dot footer. And I think it had some kind of peachy color. Now I don't know what color I'm going to use. It had like a light peach or something down here that I got from the picture. We could change that later. But if I just want to put background color, and I'll just put peach. Maybe there's a peach. Peach puff. I don't know what the hell peach puff is, but I'll try peach puff. That sounds like it might be a light peachy color. If I did that, I'll run it and refresh it. That is not going across. Why is that not going across? Footer. Let's check our HTML for that. Oh, I didn't remove this. I have to get. It's only going to have the footer class. I gave it the container class, and that if it has the container class, that means it's going to be 80% wide. And I don't want the footer to be 80% wide. I only want the container to be 80% wide. The footer is going to go all the way across. So I'll just get rid of the container in there, and now that peach puff should go across. That's not a bad color. That looks pretty close to what I have there. That's not too bad. Peach puff. So that's pretty good so far. We could put just anything behind here. You know, even if we want it to look different right now, we could just go to that banner and give that a background color. And I'll try to stay in the order that I'm going here. Nav, footer, and I'll go banner. Remember, that's the class name. And I'll just put background color. And I'll put like antique white or something. Just something really light. And that's working. Although that could be lighter, but that doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that this is working. So this is working okay. What we're going to do next is we're going to target this a little bit. We're going to put our list items from our unordered list inline so they show up here, and I'm probably just going to float them for now until we work on the flex down here. Then we could try the flex up here and see if it works, but I might just float them for now in there and change this font a little bit, start making it look a little more like the header, and then start working our way down and just do a little bit. We still have to break this up in columns, and rather than do that all in this video, I think I'll start hitting some more of that stuff in the next video in part 5. So this is part 4. I think I'm going to stop now. So we started working on our CSS, and I even ran into an issue because I found out that when I put background colors on my main classes, my main 4 elements, they're not stretching across the page because I just have a container class applied to them, but I actually need to have a container that's 80%. I need to have these elements, or these class elements, I need to have them be 100%. So they're going to be 100%, the container is going to be 80%, and the way I did that, and I did that the first time, I was just trying to save code, but by having a container inside each of them, this will be the 80%, and it'll make all the content 80%, but the whole banner itself will still be 100% across the page. The nav will still be 100% across the page. I hope that makes sense. I'm not trying to confuse you, but there's a lot of things to deal with in here, but just trying to build up to this. So as we find little problems, we have to correct them. And I knew that because that's the way I did it last time. but I was just trying to save a little code. But sometimes there's a reason why. I guess there was a reason why I did that. So this isn't a bad start. So for part 4, this isn't bad. We got our CSS working here. We'll deal with floats and flex and some of that stuff later. That's more detailed stuff. So this is real basic stuff we were working on our CSS. Resetting here, doing a global reset, making our fonts a little bigger, putting some padding below our paragraphs, making our container class, which we now actually had to make a div for a container in each of our elements, and then just putting background colors to test it out. We even have padding in here in our container, so that's creating the kind of space in here. That's the padding above and below, top and bottom, that's going on in every single element. That's the container, has padding above and below. The container's 80%. The full nav is 100%. The full banner is 100%. The full footer is 100%. So it's just the content inside is being constrained by the container. So that's what's happening. Hopefully that's not confusing. It makes some sense, and we'll keep working on this in part 5.